and welcome. My name is Vince Faney. I am the producer of a new show called Vinsanity Unplugged, in search of game changers. My job, my passion, is to go out into the community and meet with various people in different aspects of life, different careers. And so I'm looking for people who change the game within their own careers, such as doctors, musicians, artists, athletes, and social activists. And today, a nice man running for a candidate for public office, and that's Mr. Tom Bruno.
Hi.
Hey, Tom. Welcome to the show. Tell us
Thank you.
all about yourself.
Well, it's not something that you want to do is brag about yourself, but I have a passion for the homeless. Mm-hmm. I am working some projects mm-hmm. with venture capitalists and things like that mm-hmm. to try to fix or come up with a plan to repair, train, and make other people's lives a little bit better. Okay. My background is I went to college and I got drafted in the Army, mm-hmm. was a private sergeant, went to OCS, and after spending about a year and a half in and out of Walter Reed, I went back to my formal training and formed a company called Bruno Associates, and we did logistics engineering, and then I formed a software company that mistake-proofed manufacturing execution software.
Okay.
But what I'd like to really do is spend the time with a plan that has worked in Dallas, in Denver, and also Atlanta.
Okay.
And so what I'm proposing is a $35 million trust. And the reason why trusts are successful is it gets the government and the bureaucrats out of the area. It's enough money to start and fund a complete program. Okay. And it doesn't depend upon the taxpayers.
Okay.
And currently, the city of Eugene, in my opinion, is just fumbling around trying to figure out what to do with the homeless. And if mm-hmm. you go downtown around any of the buildings, mm-hmm. you're going to find a bunch of people just sitting around, mulling around.
Right.
Well, it's not fair to the police because the police are not social psychologists, and so there becomes a conflict. They do have a good program with the Red Hats, mm-hmm. but what I'm trying to do is get this $35 million trust put together. The trust leadership comes from the existing social network. Yesterday I spent some time with Ib, the owner of Cafe Soraya, okay. and he's part of the Human Rights Commission. Okay. I've known Ib for a number of years, and we've discussed some of the issues of how the city can do this or the mm-hmm. city can't do that, because it all goes back to funding. So mm-hmm. essentially, I want to create a trust that sets up for the homeless mm-hmm. to include those campers. Mm-hmm. And then I want to build some homes that cost $35K to $85K, and then some homes from $85 to $135K. Well, if you listen to the people in the know, they're saying that the lots are going for about $175,000 a year.
Right.
So you can't build a $35,000 or an $85 prefab, pre-manufactured. Mm-hmm. So my proposal is, and based on my experience in both Bruno Associates and QCR Corporation, quality equals conformance to requirements, I use grad students and PhDs, and I think going to the University of Oregon, setting up with the dean and the School of Architecture, the social science, as well as maybe the physics department, that we can get the innovation, new ideas from these grad students, undergrads, and they can formalize some test beds with this bulk of money.
Okay.
And when I had Bruno Associates, did about 85 undergrad, 10 grads, and 5 PhDs. And one of the PhDs I assisted is Dr. David Porter up at Oregon State.
Oh, right, yeah.
So this is this is a passion for mine, and Dr. Billow, who is now the Deputy VP for Research at Notre Dame, I used him when he was at Pitt. I used him when he was at Oregon State.
Right.
I used him when he was at UT Arlington, and I've used him a little bit at Notre Dame. So I've got a pretty good connection with the engineering schools, but I don't have a connection with the social science or the architecture. So what that does is it helps defer some of the cost for the students. Now, I don't know what would be my going rate here, but when I was doing it in the 90s and the early 2000s, I paid $35 an hour for an undergrad, grad student, and I paid the professors $150 an hour.
Wow.
So that helps defer, you know, some of these costs. And then the other thing I want to do is hire industrial arts teachers, pay them, also hire the union trade people to train high school students. And what they did in Dallas and Denver and Atlanta, the kids went to school for 4 hours.
Right.
And then they worked for 6 hours, getting paid minimum wage. Well, it does two things. One, over a 4-year period, they learn electricity, they learn plumbing, they learn framing, they learn cabinet making, and they get some skills to include furniture making, to include drapes, interior decorating. And so, again, money comes into the students from the trust.
Right.
And you're not dependent upon the school system, the taxpayers, to fund this.
Right. That's
So,
huge, huge. That's really
It
huge.
really is, and it's
Yeah.
very successful, but you got to have a vision of where you're going to end up being. So what they did in Dallas, and this started in 1975, 78 time frame.
Okay.
They started very small, and they just continue to grow and grow and grow. And today, they have kids in high school that are going to Love Field and going to DFW and learning to work on engines for the aircraft.
Wow.
So, you know, we've given up our industrial arts training. I may be wrong with my statistics, but when I was in college in the 60s, we had about 264 industrial arts colleges. Last time I checked, we had 4.
4, yeah. A lot of the high schools with Joe Tyndall, the guy who interviewed you before, and I was on the sidelines listening, great conversation, but he mentioned how the studio used to be a wood shop and they just gave that up. So I don't know why.
So with particularly the high school kids, it gets them a focus.
Right.
It gets them away from their computer games. It gives them some self-satisfaction.
Self-reliancy.
Self-reliancy.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kids that their parents are not working. Their parents are homeless. Their parents are living in cars. I've got a cousin that's a principal in East Texas, and once a month he mandates that the teachers ride the school bus to see where the kids live.
Oh, wow.
And you know, when a kid is living in a bus or living in a chicken shack, maybe he has a reason why he doesn't turn in his homework.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of things they do in East Texas. Those kids are getting up and hunting squirrel, rabbits, or boar to eat.
To eat, yeah.
And I mean, one of the things that he did was in the biology lab. I don't know if this is probably some issues, but you know, they would hunt and get deer and get wild boar, and they'd take it to the biology labs and let them cut it up and
They kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Yeah, there you go.
So you know, you just got to be creative.
They're
But anyway-
innovative. They're creative. Yeah.
So anyway, I think for about $500,000, we can get some portable tents with air conditioning and heat. The problem is, where do we put them? Springfield seems to have already identified some land areas where a trust could purchase some of this land. And I'm talking with Gabe Flock, and we're going to figure out some places maybe in Eugene. He's an associate planner there for the city. But you know, you have to have where these people are going to go. You got to get the neighborhoods briefed up on what we're going to do. And as I learn working with different individuals, there are some people that want to live by themselves. They want to live in small groups, 4, 5, 6. And I think one of the guys that really is a expert is Chris McAllister. He lived in a dumpster. He even took me to where the dumpster he lived all through junior high and high school. The guy's intelligent, he's smart, and he needs
brilliant.
to be
Sorry, go ahead.
He needs to be listened to.
Yes.
The problem Chris has got, and we've discussed it, is he doesn't have the resources. So if we have the big resources, based on, we can have the homeless that are having a problem with alcohol.
Right.
We can have a homeless camp that has, let's say, drugs. We got a homeless camp with battered spouses or kids.
Right.
And then we can have a different, that have lost their jobs. This goes back to the university saying, okay, what worked well in each of these 4?
Right.
What was a common thread? What was a common bond? And then we come up with some textbooks. Any of those textbooks can go to help defray the costs for going to university. The homes, I've talked to Chris at length, I've talked to Ib, and we think the right amount is about 500 homeless shelters. And they can be transitory, they can be moving. The lowest bearing fruit are these camping sites.
Right.
And I did some research yesterday on portable showers, how they can be rotated around,
Right, yeah.
and that sort of stuff. One of the issues that you have with the homeless is there are people that have got diabetes or medication requirements.
Right.
So how do we do that? How do we protect them? How do we keep them cold, or whatever we have to do? So we need to be smart enough to lay out all the issues, and this is where particularly the engineers with processes, they really do a great job of identifying all this stuff. Now you put the stew together, and you can figure out where you want to go.
Okay.
Then I want to do 500 units from about 35K to 85K. And so those people that are homeless can move up to this narrow band of homes.
Right.
There's a company in Belgium that is going to set up a plant maybe in Arkansas or Georgia where it's a prefab, and they could build the Hulk Center in about 7 days.
Wow.
And it's 48-inch wide laminated yellow pine. It's all predetermined. Now, it may take a year to manufacture all that, but once it all comes together, you have to put the foundation in. There's a large big box store that's going to build, I think, a 7-story headquarters.
Okay.
And so these are all things that are innovative and creative. So then the other one is build 500 to 85K to 135K, and at least that starts the ramping up. I think there's about 1,100 homeless just in Eugene, and I don't have a lot of the stats from Springfield, but I want to incorporate the Eugene Springfield. So then we lay all this stuff out. The university, they develop the criterion. The architecture school designs some things. We do canastoas, we do utes, we do all sorts of innovative small box homes. And then we start. And we continue to reinforce the study, the diagnosis, and that sort of stuff. The beauty of this is it doesn't take any taxpayer money.
That's huge. That is huge.
The college students, because they're going to fill my generation, they're the ones that are going to be doing the future.
Yeah.
So they're going to be writing the plans. The professors are going to be overseeing them. And when you've got a school of architecture, they're doing business/city planning. I mean, that's all what we're doing. And And of course, the high school students can learn a trade. And if they don't like that, you know, they can go into another trade or another trade. But it brings a closeness to the community. I mean, I have a friend that runs a lumber yard or a lumber mill. He has a hard time getting electricians and people that know anything about metal.
Yeah.
You know, so they have to hire retired guys like me to work it. So I want, you know, there's something going on, particularly in Australia, where there's moving away from solar. The negative about solar is you have to have batteries or something to store it.
Right.
Well, they're doing some stuff with photosynthesis where it can be stored. Yeah, so it can be stored and then used as required.
Right.
So that's why I said we can get, you know, the physics program involved. I did a project with infrared facial recognition access control, and so you have a beard, it works fine. You shave, it works fine. You wear a scarf, it works fine.
Wow.
And so what we can do is we can identify those people that are on alcohol, we can identify those people that are on an opioid.
From using a scanner?
It's the infrared, it's measuring the heat and the...
And they could tell just from that, like that person right now is on
Yes.
opioids.
Matter of fact, during the beta testing for NIST, National Institute of Standard, we watched a guy actually have a stroke.
Oh my God.
So, you know, these are diagnostic events.
Yeah.
The other thing that maybe the trust money can be used, and I think once people see success, we'll get a lot more money coming in. I know that Bill Gates just said that he's going to start putting in some more money locally for the homeless. And smart people are out there. We just need to funnel it all together and make sure that we are marching down a path that we have success.
Right. I'm glad you got together with Chris McAllister, because he's taught me a lot. You know, I mean, basically he has access to facts and spreadsheets and so forth, which has knocked aside some of my concerns about helping everybody. Because my whole thing is like, well, you know, you wave a wand, even the people who are lazy and so forth, you know, I don't want to see anybody starve, even if they don't want to work. But we have limited resources. I'm more concerned about women and children. That's my top priority. Women, single women who are running from abuse, who have children, who are living in cars, who living God knows where, and so with limited resources. But he said, you know, the $1 Million Murray situation. And he said, well, if you just ignore these people, they're costing us so much that we don't have the resource for these people. So practically, a lot of the ideas he has and what you guys have been talking about, I'm on board. I think it's great.
One other thing that some of the states are putting nurse practitioners at the elementary, junior high, and high school.
Okay.
So now we have a problem with health care.
Okay.
So we can do early diagnostics of these kids.
Right.
And there's a proposal going through some of the senates, or the state senates and houses, that they're going to put a medical doctor at the high schools.
Okay.
So they can be your point of contact with some of these opioid problems. They can be your interface with some social disorders, so that we can help out
Early
and identify early intervention, and so that we can track them. And again, this is the beauty of using grad students and undergrad students, particularly those grad students trying to get a PhD.
Right.
You got them for 4 years.
You got a win-win here. They're getting paid, they're offsetting their cost of education, and they're working on a project that is right in line with the degree they're going for.
Correct. I mean, it becomes a win-win.
Yeah.
So I've already been promised some monies. I'm finalizing some paperwork for the trust. I'm working with the people that I think have got a stakeholder, like Heather Salika and Dan Bryant, Reverend Dan Bryant.
Right.
And
Good
so
people.
what I'm trying to do is talk to them, explain what I want to do, and I'm saying I want you on the board if you're interested. And then I'm going to walk away. I'm going to continue to work Silicon Valley, the people that I used to be on boards with, and say, hey, everybody's got a problem. Seattle's got a problem, San Francisco's got a problem, Sacramento, Lexington, Nashville, everybody's got the same problem, but I think we got to resource it and do it right. I mean, it's frustrating for me that eWeb Eugene is going to give $1 million for this homeless, low income, but yet they're paying $7 million to quiet the train that may or may not work. I mean, you're still going to have 3 train crossings.
Yeah.
The whistle's still going to go the same distance.
Right.
So what are we doing?
What are we
We
doing?
got a $31 million bond issue. Where's the bond issue for the homeless and low income housing?
Yeah, and and the thing that a lot of people, just to put it out there, a lot of people who talk about, you have a lot of people who are resistant to helping the homeless for many reasons, and I'm like saying, put aside your prejudice, put aside your distaste for 1 or 2 people you may know, because there's 1 or 2 people, they always bring up this person. I know this person. Forget about that. It's a health issue to have all these people suffering out in the cold. I mean, we're talking about epidemics.
Well, my son is a medical doctor. He did a tour in Afghanistan, and he did the first kidney dialysis in Afghanistan.
Wow. On
tribal leaders and things like that. Wow. So you talk about primitive.
Yeah.
So it's a national crisis.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we seem to have the focus of you got to get a college degree, you got to get a college degree. But I'm going to tell you, you got to have some people with some skills.
Industrial arts sort of stuff. Yeah.
I'll segue. They had a government contractor that had a problem with the pacemaker. Now, my son and my daughter, I made them work with multimeters and change tires and change spark plugs and that sort of stuff because I just was hands-on. That's what my grandfather did, my father did. And so they had a pacemaker go bad. Well, between my son, a mechanic, and a cardiologist, they took a defibrillator, modified it, and they flew the individual from Bagram Air Force Base to Wiesbaden. And they wrote up a special, study, and got published and all that, and people are writing in, well, why just didn't you go down to the store and do this? Well, Afghanistan is bare bones.
Right,
you might as well be in the Mojave Desert.
Right.
So
there's no Walmart.
Yeah. But so, again, information is knowledge, and I would not be sitting here today if it wasn't for Dr. Pavan, my industrial arts mechanical drawing teacher. I mean, that's how much of an impact he had on me and my life. And so, in some ways, I'm going to pull this off. It may take me a few more years, but I retired at the age of 59.
Wow.
I'm 70 now, and the only reason why I'm into this Ward 3 City Council for Eugene is because I want to fix something. Right. And that's why I created QCR, was to fix and mistake-proof software processes. So I've got a little bit of medical, background. I got a little bit of engineering background.
Sounds like you got a lot of each of those things.
But see, that is because I was a Rhodes Scholar. That's ROAD.
Okay,
I framed houses. I put on roofs. I worked in a body shop.
Right.
I did detailing. I sprayed. Back then we used lead. I drove a forklift. So, I understand, and each of those little trades that I learned helped me when I was in the military.
How so? I mean,
well, an example, after I got commissioned, I chose armor, and I became the motor officer / platoon leader.
Okay.
And so the motor sergeant's down there teaching how to change, split rim flat tires. And I'm just smiling and laughing and looking, and he goes, "You know how to do that, Lieutenant?" I said, "Yeah, the tires that I used to do were on road graders and big earth movers. He said, really? I said, yeah, the first thing you got to do is have a cage and check out the cage. And I did it. And he goes, how do you know how to do this stuff? I said, because I've done it, you know, from the ground level on. And these little things, like my daughter, you know, she can use a pop rivet gun to fix her gutters. You know, but that's just the way that my grandparents and my parents taught me is
be nice
you needed to be self-reliant.
Yeah, it'd be nice if we all had parents that were like you.
Well, I was very fortunate.
Yeah.
So
or having a school with a good industrial arts program. Yeah.
And that's the thing that we seem to be focused, college degree, college degree, college degree.
Yeah.
And you need technicians. You need machinists. You need metallurgists. I mean, my grandfather was a coal miner in West Virginia. Moved on, became a broom sweeper in a steel mill. And when he left, he was the head steel manufacturer. And when he was in his 80s, 85, 86, they called him back in and says, we need to make this special hard steel. Can you help us? And he goes, can I come back to work? You know, because he just wanted to work. So he pulls out his little black book, and it's all in Italian, and you can't look, you know, and that sort of stuff. And they made the special steel.
Okay.
So those are the true craftsmen. And if you think about our country, where the craftsmen came from, and you go see the buildings, the churches. I mean, they are absolutely. Well, you come from Philadelphia. You've seen all those great designs.
And a lot of immigrants with the skills came over and stonework and all that stuff.
The black slaves and that sort of stuff, they were craftsmen. I mean, they really knew what they were doing, and it was experience, it was trial and error. And my life has, let's try it. If it works, let's make it better. If it doesn't work, failure is not a bad thing. But I don't want to be wasting taxpayer money. So that's my passion with solving or help learning more. There's all sorts of books out there, but I'm not sure that they have a roadmap, what works, what doesn't work, with real statistics.
Well, you know, what interests me, catches my attention right away, here you are running for public office, and it doesn't matter whether it's at a city level all the way up to the president. You know, a lot of people think we should have big government. We should have government should be spending a lot of tax dollars should go into government. All those tax dollars should be spent on us and our comfort. And I like the idea that somebody's going to go into public office and say, yeah, we're going to start using money. We're going to try to take care of everybody's needs, but let us use the minimal amount or no amount of our tax reserves. Let's find creative ways outside of what we have in the tax bank, you know, the revenue bank that the government has, and just figure out ways that we could take care of this without putting greater tax burden on future generations, and getting people in the community to get their own skin in the game and say, let's just dig in and help Tom. Well, to me, that makes more sense.
You know, Carnegie Mellon, he and Rockefeller, they had a competition on a business side, but they also had a competition on who was going to be the greatest individual to bequest to different things. You know,
libraries and stuff.
And you know that Philly and Pittsburgh have some issues, but you go to Pittsburgh, you know, Carnegie Mellon. There's a lot of Cornelius Vanderbilt University. Way back when, you know, he was the kingpin with railroads. And so you have this industrialist, Ford. You know, Ford, there's some good things that he did, there's some bad things that he did, but he went to people's homes with his management to find out where they lived and to see if the rents were too high. And he had a ceremony, and he would bring the wives and kids in to teach them English.
No kidding.
Yeah. And then when you graduated, you came in to this big pot, you climbed down these stairs, and then when you climbed out, you had American clothing on, you spoke English, and with a big certificate.
Wow.
I mean, that is, we say we're reliant on government. It's the little people like Reverend Bryant, like Chris, that are doing it day to day. And
there's so many people out there. In the community.
I haven't touched everybody.
No, yeah.
But everybody gives me another domino to go see.
Yeah.
And every time I talk to somebody about this, they say, well, what about that? Well, if I hadn't thought about it, it gets added. And as the trust gets fettered out, we're going to have a pretty good document. And then I can go to the president of the University of Oregon. I can go to the board of trustees and say, okay, what are the legal issues? And then I go to the police department and say, hey, what is it that I've left out? What do we need to do to protect people? I got interviewed by a young journalist from Lane Community College. Well, he wanted to go do some homeless. So, you know, does he need backup support? You know, and so I made a recommendation that he go talk to the police and say, what is it that I can do, or what is it you can do for me? And I think they got eventually hooked up with a red hat that he was able to get the data that he needed.
That's good. That's good. What I really enjoy hearing when I listen to you and listen to Chris and so many other people in the community and Sue, Sarah Lupe and everything is that you're out there saying, and Chris is out there saying, and Sue is like, it's, you know, this is my little fiefdom. They're not saying that. I'm sorry. They're not saying this is my fiefdom. Let's just worry about me. Let's just worry about me. Let's just worry about me. You got a lot of these people that are starting to ally together. So there's like a lot less redundancy. There's a lot less waste. You know, you're doing this better than we ever could, so we don't need to go here. We're going to concentrate on this, but we're going to work together. We're separate, but we're working together. My
life, my business, we all worked as a team. I really hired one employee, and that employee hired other employees, and they formed their own committee, and they said, we need this person, so they'd hire them. And in all those years, I only fired one individual. I really didn't fire him. The people did. Okay. Because they hired him. Yeah. They're the ones that have to work with them. And so it's kind of everything that I did in sports was as a team. You got a quarterback, you got linemen, and on a football team, the guy that really is key is that center. He's got to be the smartest, meanest, and most agile of anybody. Okay. Because if you don't have a good center, it doesn't matter who you've got as a quarterback. You know, those guards and those tackles protecting that quarterback. And, I mean, Philadelphia this year had a team. Okay. I mean, they really all loved each other, and that's how a community gets better. Yeah, yeah. I like some of the things that represent the, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a bit, but the SEAL teams, the Navy SEALs. Now, I'm not all for, like, let's be gung-ho and go in and hurt people, but what I like about the Navy SEALs is that they, you're talking about as individuals, they're committed to being the best individual they can be. Then they look at their teammates who are also high-functioning, each of them as individuals looking to be the best in every area that they need to be, and so there's that friendly competition. But when, at the end of the day, they're more concerned with as a team. They work together as a team. So you got one person who could do maybe 10 times more effective, say, the average person. But with those 6 people, they're like hundreds of times more effective because the way they just work together. And that's how I would like to see families and communities work. I agree. Yeah, yeah. So what you're doing, what Chris is doing, and you know what I hope to be a part of is this sounds great. Well, you know, again, I'm trying to give back. Sure. I sat on international boards of directors and local within the U.S. I mean, I worked with some Fortune 50 companies. I was a technologist, and I got hired, you know, to kind of oversee what the CTOs did. And it was because of my relationships with all these professors that everybody thought that I was the smartest guy going. I was just an omnibudsman that I could get the pieces together and evaluate things and make recommendation, you know, to other board members. And so life is a journey. My journey has said, hey, okay, what can I take as being a board member where you're trying to help the company grow, you're trying to help the company with resources, You're trying to make it more efficient. You're trying to not have any waste. And I'm saying, well, we can do the same thing with the homeless and the needed housing.
Yeah, and government, the whole
Yeah.
Kit and caboodle. Yeah, so I'm just kind of curious. I haven't kept up on what's happening in Ward 3. Do you have any, who are you competing against? Who are you running
Alan
against?
Zelinka is the incumbent.
That's right, Alan.
And Hugh Patterson. Hugh and I have become pretty good friends.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
And we share emails back and forth on different things. And if I win, great. Hugh's going to help me. If Hugh wins, I'm going to help him. My issue, and one of the reasons why I really got involved, was the capital PUD. We have a planned unit development that goes up a very narrow road, and I've been working with the planning department. We just had our hearing, and we're appealing what the hearing officer said, and I think we're about 18 or 19 pages. And some of the issues have to do with the way the PUD is written. If you talk to any of the land use lawyers, they're going to say it really is bad.
Right.
A case in point, they have a goal 5, and goal 5 says, well, we don't really want to have a whole lot of geological pits cut, particularly around road streams or areas that have some special foliage or wildlife or that sort of stuff. So you don't have to do a geotechnical inspection. Well, regardless, if the area is going to be a landslide, you need to do it. So we have a professor wrote up what was all wrong with the land based on the analysis. We hired another geotechnical individual, and we came up with a complete report. And so this is where the landslide, the mudslide is going to be
If
if they don't do all of the level 2 and level 3 analysis.
Okay.
And so we had a forester that independently talked about root balls and soil creep and all that. Well, I'm from a safety standpoint, and I want to make sure that we don't have something like Osso, Washington.
Oh.
And so what could happen if we don't do this exactly right, we're going to lose Hendricks Park.
And that's going to be a lot more expensive than any safety measures you could take.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so if they don't like what we said, and they like what the applicant said, I would take the data to Oregon State and let Oregon State make the determination.
Let the facts.
Right. When you cut out 467 trees, and we're talking all 5 of the 5-foot in diameter trees.
Oh my gosh.
You're talking 18 to the 21 4-foot diameter trees.
That's some big.
And we're talking 467 trees.
We're talking about big root balls.
We're talking, yeah, but we're talking 10-inch trees or greater. We're not counting the 9-inch and the 8-inch.
Okay.
Well, the applicant already got fined by the city for illegally cutting down trees once. So I'm going, our forester gave a great report, and the applicant later hired a arborist. Well, there's a world of difference between an arborist and a forester. An arborist takes care of one trees, figures out where it's going to grow and that sort of stuff, whereas a forester manages the entire ecosystem.
Right.
So again, take all the data,
Right.
send it to Oregon State, let Oregon State decide. We have a traffic engineer with 35, 40 years of experience, has been a traffic engineer for different cities. Well, you know, the applicant's engineer is now under an investigation. And
For what, if I may ask?
an ethics
Oh, an ethics.
violation.
Okay.
So we don't know what's going to happen. But again, who teaches traffic engineering? Oregon State. You know, it could be a he said, she said, she said. I don't care. Let's get the right answer.
Right.
And the planning department, their hands are tied because of these. And I'm going, what's the real, what's the focus? The focus is do it quality conformance to the requirements.
Right.
They have a road that's about 18 feet wide. Well, the city requires 20 feet with a 5-foot sidewalk. Well, are they going to grandfather an 18-foot street? Now you have a fire truck that's at least 10 feet wide. You got bicyclists. We need to have an independent party evaluate it.
Right.
And it just can't be like the hearing officer said, or hearing official said, well, the planning commission said it was good. And you're going, no, the planning commission just said, we've given you all the data. They didn't really do an analysis.
Right.
So I got mad, and I figured that my training, we put together a team, and our initial response to the hearing official was about 267 pages.
Wow.
And it's hard to get traction. And I know the home developers, want to do things.
Right.
But as we have a smaller and smaller plot of area with good land,
right,
the city does not have a geotechnical person on staff. The city does not have an arborist on staff. So they're relying on the applicant.
bringing forward his people.
You got it.
Wow. That seems kind of slick.
Well,
it seems like
I'm just saying that these are the things from a board of directors perspective.
Right.
I can go to the management and say, hey, this is what's going to happen if we don't give the planning department the right people. I don't blame the planning department. I blame the leadership. Well,
the leadership is over the planning department is the city council?
No, it's the city manager.
Oh, city Tom. Oh, it's
the only thing that the councilors do is I think we elect 3 people. One's the city manager.
Okay. Okay.
One's a judge.
Yeah. So is this one of the reasons why you decided to get into a run for Ward 3?
That's exactly right, because
you figure you
it's a safety action. I mean, it really is. Eugene, Springfield, the park, Hendricks Park, is a close national treasure trove. To me, it's kind of like Crater Lake. I mean, can you imagine if we had homes all around Crater Lake?
Yeah, condos and the golf course.
But you could. Somebody at least had the vision. And Peter Craycroft has a wonderful website giving you the whole history of Hendricks Park and the buildings up there. And he also has some things that we've posted about, the PUDs and that sort of stuff. So that's what got me interested. And as you start going around talking to people, what are the issues? What is it you want? What is it I can do? It became readily to the top that homeless, low-income housing is really the main focus of what's going to happen. I mean, in 2011 or 2021, we're going to have all these international athletes coming apart. You don't want the police involved with people that are down and out.
Right.
And having worked with some of the Olympic stuff while I was in the military, I mean, this is a major undertaking. It's a major cleanup and best foot forward.
Yeah.
Well, we need something now to start thinking this through. And the city, it's going to cost a lot of money to put on this 2011 stuff, which goes back to we can get the trust. There's there's an individual that gave $100 million to the Habitat of Humanity.
Okay.
And he gives 2,000 homes to low-income people a year.
Wow. Be nice to have that kind of money to be able to be that generous.
Yeah. Well, so those are the kinds of guys that I'm going to go, get
knock on their door.
Well, I know some of these people.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of VCs that I worked with. Mm-hmm. When you buy a company, due diligence. I went to Australia for a Canadian company, mm-hmm. and we ended up buying 2 companies there.
Wow.
I mean, you do a lot of. I worked for Texas Instruments.
Okay.
When they bought a company, so I understand the mechanics, and it's a matter of, as you said earlier, throw your prejudices aside. What is the good things that I'm trying to get? And does it make sense? I have a real hard problem with $7 million to quiet trains.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the priorities need to be changed.
Well,
yeah.
But, we don't have a bond issue for the poor, mm-hmm. because they don't have a voice. Mm-hmm. So that's really why, as you get more involved with different things, you become more energized. And so this trust, mm-hmm. is something that worked for me with my engineering students. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, maybe it'll work for the social science groups.
Yeah, that's right on. It's funny that what you're doing at your age and what I want to do at my age, and I've never had the good fortune of having kids, so I never ruined the gene pool by having kids, and so one of the things people say, why don't you're getting old? Why don't you just relax? Why do you want to get involved? And I'm like, I want life to be interesting, and as I'm going on my way out, I want to know that there's a certain pride or a desire to give back, to give and see the world become engineered as a better place. Because even though I don't have children and I don't have grandchildren, I have godchildren. I just see a lot of people out there suffering, and it's hard to accept that we can't do better for future generations. I just don't believe that. I believe we can do better.
But see, teachers, 99.9% of them really are dedicated to their students.
Right.
And we don't give them the resources that they need.
Right.
In the military, 11 was about the right number that a leader could take care of.
Okay.
And 11, 11, 11. But I don't see how a teacher in high school can handle more than 20 kids in a class.
Yeah.
And to me, the most fundamental thing we've got to do is we've got to teach kids in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade on socialization, mm-hmm. how to read. Mm-hmm. I have a cousin that her mother was from Venezuela and her dad was from the United States, and she taught English as a second language because she spent each summer down in Venezuela. Mm-hmm. And it is so critical that all these kids learn English. Mm-hmm. And that's what Ford did. Ford made people learn English.
Okay.
In the Civil War, there was a New York brigade that the brigade commander had 57 different langues.
Oh, jeez.
Now, can you imagine the span of control and that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
My grandfather, he lived in Portugal for a while, Brazil, so he spoke Italian.
Mm-hmm. Portuguese.
He spoke Portuguese. Mm-hmm. He spoke Polish. Wow. Because, the workers, and his English, growing up, basically, I tried to figure out how to talk to him in Italian.
Oh.
And then when I did, my father said, "You're an American, you don't speak Italian."
Yeah.
And I can remember that. You're an American, you speak English.
So did you ever learn any Italian?
No
capiche?
I capiche,
Yeah. Yeah.
I probably know more German and Korean than I do because, I was in the military and
right.
I spent some time. So I've been to Italy several times, and I got along.
Okay.
You know,
You made your
my
way.
problem is it's the speed.
Yeah.
If you make it slow and I can get all the enunciation, I can figure it out.
Right.
But I also wear hearing aids, and so that adds some. But you know, everything I've done is I've had some really good mentors that taught me different values, and you know, I was very fortunate. I've been, you know, it's like a lucky star. You know, yeah, I've had some issues and that sort of stuff, but I'm just saying, I feel like a lucky star, and it's time to give back.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just. I'd like to see you have all these things come into fruition, because this sort of stuff, your ideas that I've heard and heard other ideas, is, I think they should. I think they should be employed.
Well, you know, the city's going to come up with a study from somebody from Boston. I'm afraid it may just be a big weight on a wooden shelf.
Yeah.
It's not a live and learn. They don't have the resources to experiment. And that's why I say, particularly for the homeless, we may need 4 or 5 incubators, because we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
I mean, right now, what Chris is doing, what Reverend Bryant's doing, they're really putting a Band-Aid, and they just don't have the resources.
They don't have the resources.
And so that's why I'm saying, let's tap into Bill Gates. And if we have a complete plan where it's logical, methodical, the rules are made up, and the government's not involved, maybe they'll throw in $1 million, $2 million, or $10 million.
Okay.
Maybe the $35 million becomes $100 million. And that's what we need.
Yeah.
Is involvement by the community.
Yes, well, I would agree. Well, you got 5 minutes left, and so you have a website, and you have.
I do not have a website.
Yeah, but you got a lot of people.
You know, the Capitol Hill PUD guys, I'm working to get all the signatures in and proofread the final things. I made a decision that Save Hendricks Park and Capitol Hill was more important in my election.
Right, right. Well, I mean, you're talking about knocking down how many acres of trees or whatever. How many? You're talking about a lot of trees, and you're talking about.
Because there's a ridge line, they can't cut all these trees on the steep slopes because they'll just totally wipe away. The area that they're talking about is 13.94 acres.
So would they want to put a whole subdivision of houses in there?
They want to put 34 residents in this plot of land. So there are 5 lots currently. So the applicant wants to divide those 5 lots into 34. Again,
What's that area down on the other side of Hendricks Park?
That's Laurel Hill Valley.
That's a nice area.
That's where all the mudslide's going to go, across Floral Hill, Riverview, and maybe even Augusta.
God, I'd hate to see that area change.
Wow.
I mean, that's a beautiful. That's like a little rural area.
It's like a farm.
Yeah,
it's like a farm.
Yeah.
But when you look at, they're going to have to put in a $3 million pumping station, $1 to $3 million pumping station. The applicant's going to have to pay for that just to get enough water. Well, that creates problems for the fire department. You know, if they don't have enough water, yeah, they're going to have sprinkler systems to fight the fire and give the fire department a little more time to get up to the top. But it doesn't do anything if we have a forest fire. We still need, you know, the water. And it's probably the average price of the home to recover the cutting into the road, cutting down all those trees. The home's prices are going to be probably $600,000 to $750,000 each.
Wow.
And I'm going, boy, wouldn't that be better if we just expanded Hendricks Park. You know, there's an old pink house up there that the applicant currently lives in, but that's got enough history in it to worth it, you know, make it worth a national historical preservation. And I love museums. I think growing up, I lived in Washington, D.C., and we used to go to the museums a lot. And so education is important. We got to focus in it. But there's just so many issues that just doesn't make Capitol Hill PUD safe.
Right.
And that's why I really would like the city to send all this documentation to Oregon State and say, what is it? What's the ground truth?
Right.
And what are the impacts? Because whatever they do, the citizens are going to have to live with it.
Okay. I was under the impression that that you guys are sending that stuff, that you and your group.
We can only give our position
to the city.
To the city.
I see.
And then the city has to give it to the hearing official. And they're looking at, well, what's the procedure? Well, did they check this block? Is this person a certified engineer? You know, is this person a certified arborist? And they go, action passed, action complete. Well, from my business side, you got to make sure it's right from the beginning.
Right. Right. Yeah, this so much. Well, I could talk to you for hours on all these different issues.
You know, we can talk about other issues, and as I bring it together, maybe we get 6, 7 people in here and do a round discussion to say, this is where we are. We could get a big whiteboard and say, okay, this is where we are, and people can see a progress.
You know, it's funny you should say that. I was just telling some of the guys here and some of my friends about how many of you candidates, not just candidates, but other people in the community like Chris, it'd be great to have like a big panel roundtable discussion so you guys would be, you know, go back and forth, maybe even argue and disagree, but whatever, just have the whiteboard. And
I think Chris is an individual that has lived it from all aspects.
Yeah.
And there's so many people, like my kids, you know, my son sees it as a doctor, but, you know, his friends and that sort of stuff, they didn't impact it. So my daughter had a good friend that he was, his father left him. His mother had, I think, multiple sclerosis. And so he was trying to make money and go to high school.
Right.
And so I used to hire him, you know, to help around the house just so that he got a break, and it helped him. But now he has a master's degree from USC in film, and he's doing film stuff.
Oh, good.
And, you know, he thinks back to, but that's about, my daughter, you know, would say that she lived a pretty privileged life. But, so I haven't been in tuned like this.
Yeah. I mean, Chris has had I've heard of Chris' story living in a dumpster and all that. I've been, when I first got out of the Marines, being uneducated, I remember nearly freezing and starving to death back in Philly area, around Norristown, you know where all those areas are, not Philly proper.
Yeah.
And, you know, back then, you know, you were homeless, you were considered like the scum of society. It wasn't like there were legions of homeless people where I lived. It was just almost nobody. And that's kind of impacted me quite a bit. And I just always thought, you know, I would want to do everything in my power so people don't have to unnecessarily go through that experience. And then now being older, you know, I've been when I got forced out of work, I actually had property, and I was forced to live in my truck. I could not afford to live in my own house, so I'm scrambling around looking for work. So it makes you very aware that no matter how hard of a worker you are, and the willingness to do what it takes to be self-reliant, sometimes unfortunate things happen to many people, and they shouldn't be penalized. We should be out there to help each other, you know, uplift each other.
You have significant emotional events in your life. I was at Fort Hood, Texas, and I had a cousin that was in Austin, fairly close, and she worked with the disabled, the mentally ill, and all of the kids that she worked with were born normal. But because their parents beat them so severely, they got classified as mentally retarded. And so we were talking at a family reunion, and I said, well, I'll get some permission. We'll bring them up on a Saturday. We'll give them rides on the Jeeps and the tanks, and we'll put them in the mess hall and all that sort of stuff. So I asked for volunteers, and you know, these kids were in really bad shape. And my soldiers saw these kids, you know, we briefed them that they were all normal. And my incidence went way down with alcohol, you know, abuse and that sort of stuff.
Really?
And so the division commander liked it, and he kind of implemented it throughout the division that, again, knowledge is power, and people get caught up and safe in their environment until you're introduced to something that you live with or Chris lived with. So I think it'd be great to get a panel together and just educate those that are just not really familiar with what it's like. And that's why I'm really trying to put this trust together. It's a lot of work, but it's keeping my mind sharp.
Yeah, well, anything I can do, which, you know, you're talking to a guy who has limited resources, but ideas and a willingness to put what limited resources that are mine forward. So anything I could do to help or whatever would be awesome.
You know, one of the things that, as I briefed Ib last night, he said, well, why don't you bring LCC into this thing? You know, because they've got, and I'm going, phenomenal ideas. So I've got that on my checklist.
They have a what do you call it, industrial arts as far as framing and stuff like that up there,
So I'm saying, sure, why not?
Yeah.
We are trying to get some people some income with some skills and reduce the costs of homes, because any of these homes we sell goes back into the trust.
Right.
And that's how the trust, and I think when people leave this earth, you know, they can put it in the trust if they know that it's not being wasted.
Right.
And so that's why you've got to get a board that understands the vision, and it's not me, it's us.
Right. That's right. Well, Tom, it's been great. I could, again, speak to you for hours. Thanks so much for coming, and you guys, thanks for joining us, and yeah, we'll have to do this again, big panel discussion.
Okay.
Thank you.